Recently, Peachy, Tri-Cities artist/activist, held a rather impromptu rally for those concerned about the future of the Riverview Lands. Despite the short notice and rather inclement weather, dozens came out to hear Jay talk and to have their say. Tri-Cities Community TV was there and brings you this coverage.
The space and imagination, I think, is very important. And Riverview has so much. It has space, it has nature, it has an understanding, has a community understanding for what the space is. You don't have to go to another community and explain, okay, we're going to build a mental health facility, and then you have to have the whole protest thing, and people don't understand it, and the stigma. It's already defined itself as a space. It's already been developed as a space of healing. And I acknowledge we're on Coast territories, and the Coquitlam, and this is their home. And throughout all my work as a salmon activist and an artist, I've come across Indigenous healers. They've come to me because they see the authenticity. And I've been given opportunity to be with Indigenous healers, and what that energy brings in amongst the frenetic energy of the city, and having that protection, that space, that medicine that you carry with you. Because the Indigenous people were here, the medicines are in their nature. They're in their relationship with the land and the water and the air. And we need that space to be able to think that way. And you need the sanctuary. And Riverview is an amazing place, and there's lots of nature around. And I go to Bowen Island a lot, and that's a sanctuary for me. But if we think of the spirituality of this particular movement, protecting Riverview, which is the sanctity of a space of asylum and of freedom from the the rapidity of the economics that we're in today. Just kind of remember that feeling wherever you go, even if you're dealing with anxiety. That's the kind of the Riverview feeling that I would love people to have, regardless if they're here or if they have the opportunity to be there, if they're dealing with a struggle somewhere else. What we can create at Riverview is medicine for other people, and how we look at the world and how we deal with the pain and anxiety in other people, and the compassion. It's a compassionate ground. And there's not many spaces in the world where you can have an intentional space there that is all about compassion. Compassion and truth are very, very hard things. They require time. There's not enough money in the world to buy the space to do it, but it just requires a different space. That's my creative rant. If other people would like to, please step up and save the audience from me.
And my husband and I, we did just write to BC Building and expressed a real concern about a couple of things. Certainly one was the amount of market housing, and it's hard to think how market housing increases beds and services for the mentally ill. Doesn't fit for me. The other issue that we did raise, and we weren't at a number of the forums, but the other issue that we did raise is that whatever goes into Riverview should fit with a provincial plan for all of the province, and I hope it does, because we can't work in isolation. That's such a large and beautiful piece of land. There's so many possibilities, but it should fit into an overall mental health plan. And we have a son who has schizophrenia, and we've worked with him and the mental health services for over 20 years. We know the fragmentation, we know the difficulties, as many of you do. And so whatever goes in there should be part of a bigger plan, because that's important that we all work together. So as I say, we have written a letter. We were kind of rude in a way, I thought, but we needed to get the point across, and hopefully others will do the same. Thank you.
My name is Mike. I have had many experiences involving with Riverview, and in my view, I want to impart that I think a positive perspective is to, more than anything, protect the botanical gardens at Riverview. If you've ever been there, you'll know that there are very rare botanical things going on there. I mean, rare trees from Peru, I think it's important to protect the gardens in a big way. because it's really a good ecosystem there. As for those the old buildings in Riverview, some of them are very old buildings, and one of the things, my concept for what to do with the old buildings was create a clubhouse, particularly for youth. I thought would be a good idea. Things like they have an arcade or video gaming, a hangout for kids in the neighborhood, a safe place for youth to gather, or for people to sort of a community center. That was my concept. I'm glad everyone is here because we got rain, but it's good to see everyone, and thank you for all advocating to protect Riverview in whatever form this takes, or whatever decided to do with the old property. I hope everything is a good evolution for that part of our community. Thank you.
I'm really happy about that. This issue of Riverview is going in a wider way to a greater population. So in our case from Arts Connect, which is a regional arts council, 3 years ago, and we have our office basically in Riverview, so everybody knows we've been there for 10 years. And we knew 10 years ago that the question of Riverview is obviously going to surface, because we had seen it before about 15 years ago, when Mr. Ray Spaxman got hired by the province then, and there was a very important report that was done about 15 to 17 years ago, whenever it was. And Mr. Spaxman, which was a head planner at once upon a time for Vancouver, was then a consultant, and he was approached by the province and for $1 million did a study basically on Riverview. And he thought it was going to be a one-day thing. His marching orders was do an open house, public hearing. He quickly realized that this was going to be a 3-day at least minimum, and so thus was born. Most of the people around that I know, that I've seen around, got quite involved then to get in front and tell this province what their dreams and whatever else, vision for Riverview. And it did come about, and then they realized that there was a real groundswell here in terms of Riverview, and basically it stopped, right? So the province parked it. And at the time, I believe Mr. Kishore, which is here in the audience, and I remember because we were doing community TV and he'd come in, and we got a sense of that, the feeling that there was leadership that was showing vision and we're showing something interesting about Riverview. So anyway, all this to say, Arts Connect from a regional perspective said, well, we had strategic workshops and we came up with 4 key words. And that's the way we see Riverview to this day. So we see it as a regional, iconic, cultural landmark. And a cultural landmark, it's really important to understand what that means. This is like a deep, deep embedded history of something which had 8,000 years at least of usage by one culture. They were called Coquitlam, of which, by the way, they've done a land claim on it now recently, and that's a very good beginning for me for the dialogue. This is a journey to a dialogue, this whole thing about Riverview. And you couldn't have as the widest spectrum of the, what I call the stakeholders. We have there in Riverview the essence of what Habitat in 1976 here in Vancouver, where the whole world came here to study human settlement issues. We have it in Riverview, right here in our own backyard. This is a national, provincial, and it is a lower mainland issue, Riverview. There's no question about it. And if you'd understand that UBC to this day holds the 100 and some countries that came here to discuss human settlement issues. This is what this is. This is a human settlement issue. So we're really well positioned because, as Jay said so beautifully, this environment has adopted and embraced what's there now in terms of the mental health. And I'm hoping we embrace also the fact that there was 8,000 years of uses on that upper end that we need to grasp and understand. And no matter what you might be told about the position of Coquitlam, understand that they've had to, and as most tribes across this country, they've had to develop their own strategies vis-a-vis anything that comes from us. So I'm really concerned if we start thinking we know what Coquitlam is up to. In their minds, first of all, they're they're a group that is struggling inside by design of our own making, right? You have in every tribe a power struggle. We've designed this. We've designed this as the new settlers. So in this tribe, like any other tribe across Canada, you have what is called the government chiefs, and then you have the hereditary chiefs. And I think everyone needs to grasp what that implies. There's a struggle going on within the tribe, and we've made sure that that design's in place. Okay? So, what I'm happy about is they're around the table talking. So are the environmentalists. The tree people did a beautiful job on Riverview for 25 years. The Gillespies, everybody that Riverview Horticultural Center Society, we wouldn't even be here talking. So for me, you have environmentalists. The conversation is just beginning. I've predicted this is going to go on for 5 years. Nothing's going to happen there. There's another election coming provincially. So I'm really happy that we are where we are.
Merci beaucoup.
Roger's connection in reference to the Habitat for Humanity, I think, was very appropriate as we get our mutual community gathered around this issue. I got here late, didn't hear what everybody had to say, so I'm not going to go through a whole lot. But I do want to say that Yogi Berra was right. Deja vu all over again. We've been through this. And we can take from that a tremendous amount of inspiration, because there is the wherewithal within those gathered, as been pointed out. There's a symbiosis here on this issue that cuts across political lines, that cuts across things that might divide, and it totally unites a wide variety of human resources in this community that have been through this again. Some of us are older, not all of us, but some of us are older now. And it maybe takes a little more energy than we have, and that's why it's so important that we manage to swell our ranks and send a formidable message to those who are in positions of having decision-making power. I can't emphasize enough how important it is to remain connected with the Mayor and Council, with the MLAs, members of Parliament, people that are able to speak to those who are in power and make them know of the determination of this community. And this is a determination that is based on values. It's based on an understanding and an awareness of what is really needed in order to continue to build a wholesome society. One of the arguments that is used for more market housing in such an inappropriate place is that we need housing for people. That's true. But one of the things that has been emerging, especially over the last 2 years, is an increase in the density. People are living in smaller spaces, and they're living with larger demographics crowded into spaces. So if we are in a community, and if it takes a village to raise a child, we need to have those places that we can go and experience the spiritual and mental health values that have been spoken about so eloquently here today. That is absolutely essential in the emerging reality with regard to densification of population. So that's just one more point that I would want to add to this argument, and to say that if there are people in Victoria who think they're going to get away with this, they have another thought coming, because the resources of this community, the breadth of those resources, is formidable. Thank you.
Riverview Hospital lands were created by the provincial government in 1905 to be a center of excellence for mental health care. It was innovative in its time, and it created opportunities for the patients to get out, to work on a colony farm, to have outdoors experience, to be close to nature, and it was a new approach to mental health care. For over 100 years, Riverview has continued as a center of excellence for mental health care. It was always innovative in its treatments. At one time, it had 4,500 patients there. The province's first botanist established a fantastic tree collection there, which remains to this day. The trees are now mostly mature. They're from all over the world, from temperate zones. And it's a beautiful site. When you're at Riverview, you feel close to nature and you feel the healing powers of nature. Everyone does. Whether you're mentally ill or you're mentally healthy, Riverview is a place to come and feel spiritually enriched by the surroundings there. So what's happened now is the provincial government has announced a different vision for Riverview, which is not supported in this community. They want to have a little bit of Riverview saved for mental health care, but they want most of it to be developed for residential housing, for shopping, and for economic development. And they're not even promising to protect all of the trees, which is outrageous. So that's not what this community wants. We want to return mental health care to Riverview, and it's still there, but we want to bring the patients back because we know that there's a need. There's a need for beds for dementia patients. There's a very serious lack of places for these people to go, and Riverview would be a wonderful place. You can look out the windows and enjoy nature at your doorstep. It's a great place to be.
My name is Richard Stewart. I'm mayor of Coquitlam, and we're here on the Riverview Hospital lands. 240 acres of spectacular heritage buildings and arboretum and forests. 240 acres that has been dedicated for 100 years into the service of British Columbians who have mental illness and who have addictions. We've called on the provincial government to contemplate re-establishing one of these buildings for the treatment of addictions here in the province, and really re-establishing mental health services on the site. My family faces mental health issues, and we know, as many families do, the challenges with mental illness and addictions. We in Coquitlam want that kind of service to be re-established here at Riverview Hospital. The building behind me is West Lawn. It was the first building built. It was built in 1913, and it was actually mothballed effectively in 1983 and never maintained since then. So you can see the damage that the years have had on what was a magnificent heritage building and really has lost all of its heritage value. You see, we're in an arboretum that's quite magnificent as well, but some of the trees that are also 100 years old have failed. They've hit storm damage, and there's a chainsaw right now cutting them up and trying to maintain a little bit this spectacular arboretum, this wonderful grounds. You see the building that has failed, the building that is of no value anymore. We have other buildings on the site, though, that still have an awful lot of use left in them, many years of use left. And the building right in front of us, this is Center Lawn. It was built in 1924, and it was the longest used building, the longest occupied building on Riverview. It actually was used until 4 years ago with patients. There's a further building about a half a kilometer away. It's called East Lawn, built in 1930. The one that's used the most for the film industry, because that's one of the main functions right now here on Riverview, is Crease Clinic. Crease Clinic was built post-war. In 1948 it was completed, and it was primarily built for those people returning from the war with what was called shell shock then. Now it's called PTSD. And many of those veterans were treated for years in that really spectacular building. And today it's used primarily by the film industry as a university, as a justice building, as a penitentiary, any number of roles that it plays in film. Riverview has more than 100 buildings, and the buildings are ranging essentially in age from very new buildings, there's 4 or 5 that are built in the last decade, to buildings that are now failed completely. We here in Coquitlam have contemplated how we could possibly use Riverview's buildings, use Riverview to continue the long-standing role that it played in mental illness. We had a report drafted by a couple of years ago here in Coquitlam by Dr. John Higginbottom. Dr. Higginbottom used to be the vice president of Riverview Hospital and worked for many years here. The report he proposed was that one of these spectacular buildings, and it was actually this one that was his recommendation, Center Lawn, could be used to treat those with severe mental health and addictions, the SAMI population, significant mental health and addiction. So we in Coquitlam are hoping that the provincial government will contemplate really a significant expansion of the treatment options. To their credit, they actually have started already. There are 2 buildings here on Riverview, Hillside and Brookside, that have been repurposed in the last couple of years and now house people and treat people with mental health and addictions, and do it very successfully with Coast Mental Health.